Hey everybody, how's it going? Thank you for joining me this afternoon. We're back to doing some of our current events stream, though this one's going to be a little different. We'll talk a little bit about the news of the week, but I also want to do something I haven't really done on this channel yet, which is kind of review a new movie. We had Top Gun Maverick come out this week, and it broke a number of records. I think it's one of the best grossing movies in a long time, especially since theaters kind of come back after COVID. I want to talk about why we think there's some good quality in the movie itself, and then its different themes, what it's saying. I think there's a number of different angles to kind of look at that, and so we'll go over the news of the week, and then we'll get into the guts of Top Gun Maverick. So make sure you stick around for that. But joining me this afternoon is, of course, American Ostrakon. Thank you for coming on, sir.
As always, Auron, it is a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, I was hearing rumblings. When will we see another Ostrakon stream? Enough of these high profile journalists. We demand American Ostrakon.
we demand your baseline co-host from time to time.
Absolutely,
Can't have all the celebrities all the time. Gotta have your regulars too.
The people know what they like, and the people like American Ostrakon. And who am I to deny them?
I'm not going to complain.
That's right. Right. Well, again, thank you guys for joining us. We're going to go ahead and jump into this. So, of course, this month is it's the new holy month, and so that means that every company had to go ahead and post their approval of the state religion. We of course always get a few hilarious ones when this happens. There's always a few social media managers who don't necessarily think their post through. So this one ended up getting taken down real quick. But I think that this is a shaving company. They've posted something like this a few different times, I think, in the past, but this year it hit a little different. And so there's a number of ones like these. We always get a few that are circulating, some of them old, some of them new, but there's always someone who manages to mess this one up.
I'm saying this was done intentionally. They knew what they were doing. They just wanted to get cute about it.
I guess I don't know. Like I said, I think it was probably a mistake, but hilarious nonetheless. That said, though, I want to get a little of course, we'll see a lot of mistakes like that from people throughout the month of June, but I wanted to get into a discussion that this month has kind of spawned, because last year we saw this story. Let me bring it up real quick. We saw this story.
While you're doing that real quick, something I find very funny is you get the images where it's the Twitter accounts for a single company, but they have the images from each country of which they're being represented in, right? So you've got like all the countries have the exact same like gay pride changed version of their like BMW, but it's all gay pride except for the one that's in Saudi Arabia or except for the one that's in China. So the Twitter handles for like BMW Saudi Arabia remains the same.
Yeah, you always see this. They'll do a list of like BioWare or BMW or whoever it is.
It'd be like BioWare Russia will not be changed.
Yeah, you'll have 15 different pride flags and all these different ones, and then like Saudi Arabia and Russia will still be normal.
It's just very mercenary, which I'm a fan of.
Yeah, so obviously we see a lot of hypocrisy with this. We see a lot of mercenary tactics. We see, the hypocrisy is, obviously we know, not a lot of value in harping on that too much, but there is a discussion that has arisen around this. Last year, this journalist, I guess we can put in air quotes, decided to do a story about how, actually, it's really important for kids to go to pride parades and see like sexually explicit stuff, not just flags and love is love or whatever signs, but it was really important for them to see these alternative lifestyles acted out in public. And so she wrote this article about, yes, it's important to like have this aspect on full display in front of everybody. And there was a lot of backlash. I did a whole video on this actually about why there's kind of, you can't have a rational discussion about this because there's no middle ground, right? Like any attempt to negotiate about this is going to end up with the sexualization of children, and it's not okay to do that. That's not, you have to take a firm stand. You cannot negotiate with the kind of that, or it will continue. And a lot of people thought, well, she got a backlash about this and this discussion is kind of over. That's the end of it. But of course, actually, not at all. This year, we got another article saying basically the same thing. In fact, it was more explicit about the fact that you need to take your children to a pride parade or pride festival, and they need to be comfortable with public nudity and displays of sexual alternatives in public. And they specifically obviously say in the post, this is for children. This is what you need to normalize for your kids. You need to expose them to this at a young age to normalize it. And so this discussion is not going away. This is not, again, like, this is not something that we
This
talk
is
about.
Weimar Republic level of insanity at this point.
Oh,
What
it's
discussion
beyond
at
that.
this point, Auron? Like, I mean, it's over. Like, the discussion time is over. At this point, it's just waiting for things to get worse.
Well, and
What's there to discuss? Like, I mean, I hear what you're saying. I get what you're getting at. It's important that you talk about these things. It's important that you remind these people of things. But it's just, at some point, it's just like, got it. Like, there will never be reasoning with these individuals.
yeah,
And that's it.
well, and that's the thing, right? Is it's not, like I said, you can't have a negotiation on this. It's not about the dialectic, because the dialectic will only normalize this stuff. That's a mistake that the right makes on a regular basis. Well, we can explain to people why this isn't okay. We can explain to people why this doesn't work. Well, if you don't
Putting
understand
it within
why
the
it's not,
rubric of a argument, right? Like, the fact that we are putting it in a situation where we allow them to debate with us to begin with is to acknowledge that their viewpoint has validity.
yeah, there's no way to have a discussion about this without ceding ground, saying that this is an acceptable thing, and now you're negotiating some kind of middle ground to it, right? And as you pointed out before we got started, the outlet running this is named Fatherly. Now, obviously, we both know that it's a highly leftist and progressive outlet, but it is named specifically with the intention of subverting this, right? Like, this is the kind of things that a father should be protecting their children from, should be protecting their family from.
Not
And
promoting.
instead, the outlet giving them advice is giving them this kind of advice, right?
I mean, yes, you're correct. It's just, there's not much more to say on the subject
No,
from my end.
I understand.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there's nothing I can say.
Yeah.
Well, there's
no,
plenty I can say. There's nothing
right.
I can say.
Exactly. As much as we can cover this topic without, keeping the channel, around.
A channel.
Yeah, a channel. So, since, but the most shocking thing, which again, I guess shouldn't be shocking to anyone at this point, but the most shocking thing that happened, that was caught, was in Dallas here. And in Dallas, they had a scenario where there's this nightclub and they were having a drag show specifically for children. It was called Drag Your Children to Pride. Yes, that was the name.
You got
And
7, 8-year-old kids doing drag shows.
yeah, well, they're in this case they're not doing them, though. You can certainly find footage of that too, as horrific as that
Gotcha.
is. In this case, they were there, and you can see in this video, they're tipping. Let me see if I can play this without the audio, because no one wants to hear that. But you can see here they're tipping the drag queens, right? And this one is not as explicitly dressed as others, but others show up that are far more, they're in women's lingerie and stuff. So this gets far more explicit. These children are being subjected to this, right? And so we're not just in a situation where it's outside. People are bringing their children, to this kind of display, and
Willingly.
they're actively like throwing money at people dancing in what is, and you can obviously see the sign behind it, which is sexually explicit. This is obviously horrific, right? And like you said, this is very much Weimar stuff, right? And so, um as you pointed out, there's only so much to say on this. You don't want to stare into the abyss too long, I guess, on this stuff. uh, what I really want to just make clear to people is this issue is not going away. This issue is not go yes, there's a concerted effort to push this stuff. Yes, it is explicitly pushed at children. They are more and more comfortable with stating out loud that the very purpose of it is for children. It's not for adults. It's not for just for adults to enjoy or celebrate something. It is explicitly like we have to bring children to this. They have to be sexualized at 7 or 8 years old. They have to be exposed to this stuff. This is the explicit purpose. They're not hiding the ball here anymore. But like I said, only
I
so
mean,
much we can say on that. Yeah.
yeah. Can we move on to another topic? You're just
I
angering up the
understand.
blood.
Yeah, eventually, yeah, I get it. All right, so let's talk now about uh uh do you want to get to, I guess before we get to the movie, we could also talk about the push for gun control here recently.
I mean,
Obvious
yeah, we can. Yeah, I've got a bit to say on that.
Okay, so just for many people, I'm sure you're aware, but obviously after the spate of shootings, especially obviously the one at the elementary school here recently, the kind of the sides have fallen into their rhythm about gun control. Uh, the right was like, we need to harden targets, and all the talking points you'd expect, and of course the left is like, we have to ban like every gun. They started out with, oh, it has to be assault weapons, but then obviously there was a couple different clips of like different senators and congressmen who couldn't.
Don't say the word clip.
Yes, well, in this case, it's accurate.
I
It's
know it's
about
appropriate.
the
I'm
clip of
kidding.
the video, not the clip of the gun. Um, that is a magazine, unless it's a stripper clip. You could be
in
firing.
which case it is a clip.
In which case it is a clip. But obviously, a number of different left-wing, senators and congressmen made it clear that when they say an assault weapon, they mean anything that's semi-automatic. When it was brought up to them that includes the vast majority of pistols, they said yes. Joe Biden talked about how the 9mm round needs to be banned because it'll blow the lungs out of human beings. A lot of this is ridiculous, of course. It's very cartoonish. We're seeing Democrats basically throw everything against the wall. They know they're not going to get a real ban, so they're looking to push things like more background checks or red flag laws. I feel like once again they're not going to get anything here. But I don't know. The Republicans are making noises that they're amenable to this. What do you think? Do you think they're serious about this? Do you think they'll get anything? Are we just going through the motions?
No, I don't think we're quite going through the motions this time. I think they're going to gain a little traction on gun control, and not due to safety, right? This is a topic that really has nothing to do. If the powers that be actually cared about our safety, there would be other measures that would be taking place, right? It wouldn't be just gun control, or gun control would not be the solution. Because if you look at guns, if you want to argue is violence is a disease, which I hate to use that argument, but then gun violence would be the symptom, not the disease itself. No, what the bigger fear is you got to look at it a little more macro level. We've got a credit bubble. We've got a housing bubble. We've got record high inflation, and inflation in such ways that it's really hitting people in very real ways, right? When you go to the store and you buy like a single bag worth of groceries and it costs you $55. When you go to the pump and it costs you $80 or $100 to fill up your tank, right? When you have your food and energy um, increase your inflate your food and energy costs, these are visible everyday things that affect everybody, and so therefore, um, people are definitely going to start to question, like, why am I voting, or why am I worried, or why am I trying to keep these people in power when I can't even pay the bills, and my kids don't have food to eat, or I don't have kids because I don't make enough money to actually get married and have a house because I've been renting for the last 25 years because make just barely enough to survive. I mean, and the irony is not lost on people either when it comes to, you've got the war in Ukraine where we're spending billions upon billions of dollars. And basically that money is going to U.S. weapons manufacturers to produce weapons to send to Ukrainian civilians to fight Russian soldiers, all the while they're preaching gun control at home. So you're taking our taxpayer dollars to buy weapons for people overseas so they can fight against people, and yet at home you're saying we have to have gun controls. You've got 30-year-olds. I was talking to one of the taxi drivers the other day when I was going home, and he's saying, he's 30 years old. He's got no family, no home, no money, no prospect to improve his position in life. When you start to take young men and men moving into middle age who have nothing, we were talking about this before the start of the stream. Is African proverb that's been spinning around in my head. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And I think that's applicable in this situation. When you don't provide, when you don't give, in this case, men or women, whatever you want to call it, when you have no wife, child, hearth, and home, you're a lot more. I mean, we're living this in Afghanistan, right? If you don't have anything to live for, you're a lot more willing to be extreme, right? If you don't have a good job, if you don't have family, if you don't have those social mores which keep you grounded to your community, then why wouldn't you go off and try to change things? And that's the fear. And I think that's why it's going to drain more. That's why the Republicans and the Democrats are now, I think going to try and have a little traction when it comes to gun control. Though personally, I think the cat's far out of the bag when it comes to gun control, right? The United States is far too large, and there are too many firearms out there already. Like, it's never going to happen, even if it does. That was a bit of a rant, but that's where I'm at right now.
No, I think that's right on a lot of levels. That's why I think it's death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like, they know they can't just go confiscating. They know that, I'm very skeptical. People always tell me, "Oh, the crackback's coming. The crackback's coming." It's like, guys, if it was coming, COVID would have done it.
It would have happened already.
Yeah. So I'm pretty skeptical about the popular crackback. But I will say, if there was one thing that's going to do it, it would be like large scale gun confiscation, right? So I think you're right that it won't be. They can't really get all of those guns. They can't hope to. So I don't think you're ever going to see that large scale. I think they're just going to try to pare back. And in a lot of ways, by making self-defense functionally illegal, you have gotten rid of the Second Amendment without getting rid of the Second Amendment.
That's true.
And I think, Tucker Carlson, to his credit, I couldn't believe he said this. Maybe people didn't realize how controversial it was at the time. But last week, he was talking about why DAs won't prosecute, gangbangers and drug runners and all kinds of people with weapons charges in the United States, but they want to push, restrictions on law-abiding gun owners. And Tucker Carlson said to the guest, that's because the Democrats want their supporters to own guns and not Republican gun supporters, right?
Sure.
And I think that's right.
Which is
I think
factual.
Of course, yeah, I think it is. And so I think that's the game is they know they can't, they're never going to do like an Australian buyback and get most things. So what they're doing is, you just own the DAs, you own, federal law enforcement, you make it functionally illegal to defend yourself, get people used to having to watch their town burn, their city looted, let people, wreck them. And then, does it at that point, no one's really thinking about pushing back. But I think you're right. I think there is a very serious issue as material conditions degrade, as people have no hope when it comes to like a future of prosperity. Then they have to turn around and look at the rest of their society. And as we just looked at the beginning of this stream, the rest of the society looks pretty bad. And so a lot of the kind of the moral degradation of the West has been papered over by kind of the miracle of material progress. But now that that is slowing down and things are kind of falling apart in that area, it becomes very clear kind of what the problems are for young men, especially like you're talking about. And that gets dicey.
You can take away from people as long as they're fat and happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if they are content and they are able to, purchase things and fulfill their material needs, you can take. But when you can't provide that anymore, people start to question why we're listening to you, I guess, is really what I'm trying to say. I mean,
No,
and maybe there's like 20 more iterations of this, is like, once they take away our Soylent Green, then we'll start to be serious about it.
right.
But so like, I hear what you're saying, that I'm not so naive as to believe there's going to be some great snapback, but at some point the trains have to run. At some point, the food has to get to the table. The farms have to be tilled. And if you take generations of people and basically make it so they have no motivation to improve themselves in any way, because they'll never have anything and they'll never earn anything that's theirs. There's a reason why people at McDonald's are now making $15 to $20 an hour, because nobody ever wanted to do it, but they're finally at the point where they realize it's like, somebody's got to flip the burgers.
Yeah, they haven't automated all of those positions out yet, and that's a problem.
Right.
I think the thing, like you're saying, I don't think there'll be a big popular crackback, but as things fall apart, like you said, people get desperate. They look for things. No one came and sounded a gong at the end of the Roman Empire. No one came out and announced it's over, and now we're in another phase of civilization. Like, people still thought of themselves as living in the Roman Empire, but we, looking back today, realize it was over, right? And so, like you said, those young men especially, I think that's a really important focus. Those young men especially, we don't have to be politically correct about that. That's why we're here. When they're when they're left alone to their own devices,
they get destructive.
If you don't if you don't give them something to build and protect, if you don't give them something to conquer and maintain, then they will use that energy. Exactly. They'll use it to destroy it. And so, that this is why men become pirates, right? Like, this is why you want, if your civilization gets to a certain point, you kind of need an empire, because you got to ship these, you got to ship these second and third sons somewhere, right?
The ones that aren't going to give them something to believe in.
Exactly.
Right? They have to do something that they can improve their position in life, or at least given the opportunity to improve their position in life.
And if you don't do that, then like you said, they pursue those things at home in ways that are very destructive.
Every boy wants to have his adventures, and he will have them. It's society's job to ensure that said adventures are going to be for the benefit of that society, as opposed to its detriment.
Exactly. And so I think as society is less and less capable of providing meaning and structure and positive outlets for those things, they will naturally, kind of come apart at the seams, and it won't be pretty. But as you pointed out, the people in power, both left and right, certainly don't want a populace capable of defending itself in those times. So
you're absolutely. They don't, right? Yeah. It's much easier if they can't fight back, even though they're spending billions to send to other countries so they can fight. And then you get people like Dan Crenshaw, who takes pride in the fact that soldiers don't get sent overseas to wage war. It's like, well, that's what soldiers are for. We signed up to fight in wars, right? That's the job. to take pride in the fact that you create soldiers or train and educate soldiers that they never have to fight is just flabbergasting to me, you know?
I mean, it's the old neocon thing, right? Every this happens all the time. Like this is a cycle throughout history. People think they're really
It is.
clever. They think they're really clever by funding, the country next to them, the armed rebels in the country next to them, and then they end up paying the price because they don't have any actual ability to have military force of their own. This is an easily observable pattern throughout history.
It is
Foxes
an
think they're very
easily.
clever.
We'll just arm those people right next door to us to fight
Yeah,
our battles for us.
yeah,
Oh no, look at those highly trained combat veterans who now have all the weapons we just gave them, and they have no particular loyalty to us. Wow, why are they knocking our gates now? How could we have not foreseen this?
yeah. How we made everyone in the legions German who is good at fighting, and
And
surprise,
like now they want
surprise.
to make their own empire with
Right.
blackjack and hookers.
Yeah,
Like, well, yeah,
exactly.
of course they do, because they did all the fighting for you.
Yes.
It's combat or fighting, waging war is a bit like going to the gym in the sense that it's not something that you can pay to have, right? You earn it through your toil and your sweat and your training and skill. And it's dangerous and violent and bloody, but it is not something that somebody else can take away from you, or it's not
Yeah.
something. Well, it's not something you can earn any other way but by doing. Is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. You can
And so,
farm that responsibility out to people mercenary style for a while, but
right,
eventually
but then
that
you have
you
well
always pay
trained
back.
mercenaries
Right. And well
who
funded.
follow well funded, well trained mercenaries who follow the dollar or follow
Hmm.
money and not you. So like this is the concern. This is
Yes.
why, if you're gonna have mercenaries, you always want to make sure your army is bigger. It's okay to have a few,
And
but
and this is
but
why. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, it's okay. This is all very good transition into our subject of Top Gun, actually.
Yeah, well, but we're going to move into that in just one second. But I wanted to say this is why it's really important for people to understand that political formulas are really important. A lot of times when we explain kind of the Machiavellian, mechanical explanation for how politics works, people think that means that you can just kind of tinker with it. You can just be like a soulless engineer rearranging these things and then getting the outcome you want. But that's not actually true. Like, yes, every regime needs a political formula, and you need to have a working political formula in order to like have your society function. But it's also really important to understand that people actually have to believe in your political formula. Like, you can't actually just like do it because it's useful and then discard it, because if you do that then people become mercenary, like Ostrakon's talking about, and then you don't actually have the loyalty of your people, or most importantly your military. Like you want military people who fight and die for the country because it's yours and they believe in it, right? Not because the dollars
Not
there.
because it's a paycheck.
Exactly.
I
And so
mean,
it's
you have to fund your military just like anything else, but that should
right.
not be their primary motivation for doing what they do, which
Yeah,
it's
you
kind of become, really, let's be honest,
and the
for a
same
lot of
thing for
people.
and the same thing for the politicians. Like, you need a political formula that like actually everyone including the ruling class actually buys into. You can't just this is a big problem for like rationalists, right? Like, I always talk to rationalists. They're like, well, why don't we just engineer like the best religion and it'll give us all the things we like and that'll be the best thing and then we'll do it. It's like, no guys, the magic of religion is you believe it. Like, it works
Right.
because you actually believe it. If you just engineer it in like a lab, it doesn't work. And the same thing's true political formulas. You need a narrative, you need a noble lie for your civilization that people buy into, especially your military. You can't just like engineer something that you callously disregard when it's advantageous for you. Like, it really has to bind your society together, especially your armed forces, or you end up with exactly the problem that Ostrakon is explaining.
And it's so, you don't have to have your hands on the lever of power and also be a cynic, right? It's
Hmm.
not mutually exclusive, but I feel that in this day and age it's become that. And it's really depressing that, like, it's just like there's got to be, I mean, they don't exist, but at some point in America's past, or in, let's say, in any empire's past, the people who really got it off the ground really believed in the ideals of what they were fighting for and what they believed in. They had to have, right? If the founding fathers didn't care who was in charge of the United States or who was in charge of what would become the United States, they wouldn't have put their own fortunes on the line, and they wouldn't have put they wouldn't put themselves on the line. They wouldn't have risked their lives, their fortune, and their sacred honor, I think is what they said at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Our lives, our fortune, our sacred honor. They wouldn't have risked those things because at the end of the day, regardless of who was in charge, they would have been okay, right? They would have, even if it was just became part of another British colony, and that's the way it always was until this present day. They, as individuals, would have survived, or their families would have survived and been fine. So you got to have, as you've said many times in the past, you have to have skin in the game, and to enact real change. And I'm probably rambling on a little. I'm rambling a little bit today, but it's just, unless you have, like you say, unless you actually truly believe in something, it's okay to be cynical about things and to recognize the hypocrisies around us. But like, if you have only cynicism in your heart, and a lot of these leaders, I really do believe, are just cynical about everything and don't really believe in anything. It's just the recipe for a failed state.
Well, I like what you said there about you can have your hands on the lever of power without being cynical, because I think that's really important. I think that's what creates the mandate of heaven, right? It's the
Correct.
When you have leaders who have the right to rule, they acknowledge their right to rule, but the right to rule comes from the fact that they are working for the good of the society, right? And that, without that, when it's just the purely cynical manipulations and machinations, then it's very clear, right? It becomes very obvious. And of course, that doesn't mean that everyone who thinks that they're doing the right thing, is obviously, like, people do terrible things, thinking that they've got the right answer. But it's important to understand that there is, there is leadership. You're somebody who's obviously led in very serious combat type situations. There is leadership that comes from competence. There is leadership that comes from duty. And if you and as someone who's been in those situations, firsthand, like, someone has to take charge and take control, and if they don't lead with that assertiveness, then people pay a price. And so it's
die.
Understanding, yeah, exactly. And so understanding that is really important.
That's a great scene in Battlestar Galactica when they keep doing the multiple jumps, and they're all exhausted, and they're having to make all these mathematical calculations very quickly, and their brains are fried, and one of them screws up and they lose a ship. And Captain Adama doesn't yell at the person who screwed up. He just looks at the person and says, the simple facts is that when we fail, people die. And that's the crux of it, right? That's the point. It's leadership is not there because it's great to be in charge, or because it's fun to tell other people what to do. Is when you have incompetent leaders, people die needlessly because the correct decision, or at least the most correct decision with limited information, was not made at that time. So this is why you need competent people, regardless of their political viewpoint. This is why the trains have to run on time. This is why the food has to be delivered, regardless of what the individuals who are running the trains or delivering the food actually think. And this is some core concept that the left is just not understanding, or choosing not to understand, as if once everyone has the same ideology, everything's just going to work out. Like, no, because your ideology is not going to be in line with what a lot of society has to do on a daily basis. If you are a soldier, chances are you're probably not going to have a very leftist ideology. And I'm going to say, like, combat soldier at this point, because obviously we've talked about the military itself being completely, taken over by the left. But, like, there are certain jobs that will always make you a more conservative or a less progressive person, because you see the realities of how the world works. Because there's certain jobs that are required to be done, They tend to be dirty jobs, violent jobs, but that are necessary. That will never make you a progressive, but those people have to exist.
Yeah, I think, it's the fact, it's that end of history mentality, right? That the progressives, the left, they felt like we got to the point where civilization was stable, we'd figured out everything, the mechanism was perfect. Of course we're going to have food, of course we're going to have fuel, of course we're going to have, the ability to protect ourselves. The American empire had conquered the world. There was no need to worry about any of this stuff anymore. So now we can just do whatever we want to the ideology because the machine is infallible, right? And so they don't realize, they it feels like they felt like they could really just tinker with anything because the system was so stable that nothing could the food would keep getting delivered. The society would stay more or less relatively intact. And I think we're all seeing that, unfortunately, that is not the case.
That is not the
So,
case at all.
all right, so enough teasing. Let's get to the actual meat of the stream today.
When will we get to the fireworks factory?
That's I was promised a movie. So, like I said, this is something new, but I figured this was a good movie to start doing this with, because it's one probably a lot of you have seen. And to be clear, I mean, obviously, spoiler alert is going to be coming here. So if you have not seen the movie, make sure that I guess you're turning it off, or you come back to this later or whatever. But this thing had like one of the biggest opening in many years. I think it's at like $500,000 or $500 million already worldwide, just in the last like week or whatever of its release. So huge movie post COVID, like just crushing everything. And there's a lot of good reasons, right? This is one of the first big blockbusters. Well, I shouldn't say that. There have been big movies that have come out. There've been a lot of comic book movies, right? A lot of sequels to sequels, and of course, this is itself a sequel to the original Top Gun. But this one felt different in a
This
number of
feels
ways.
like a 80s 90s blockbuster.
Exactly.
Like it doesn't feel like another soft reboot.
It's
I guess it
doesn't
kind of is.
it
Eh,
is, but it's not all
it's
CGI, right? We're using
right.
there's real
It's
planes.
it's a direct sequel, actually. It's
Yeah,
not a soft reboot. It is
yeah.
the continuation of the story.
But like I said, it also felt a little. I feel like it's less cheapened because it's not the 20th of something.
It
It's
was also 30 years in between movies, which gives you
yeah.
time to be nostalgic.
It's probably the last big Tom Cruise movie, right? Like
It is.
he looked. Tom Cruise has been defying age for a very long time, but I think this is the first time in a long time I've looked at a Tom Cruise movie and been like, oh, he looks old, man. Like he
It's
looks.
it's the it's the Marissa Tomei effect, as I like to call it.
Yeah. Well, don't get me wrong. I mean, you've got Jennifer Connelly in this movie, and whatever she's sacrificing to, that's working as well.
Also a member of the Marissa Tomei effect.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know
Like we
what
could.
they're. Yeah, they don't have Scientology to fall back on. It's, Tom Cruise, and his Thetons.
I mean,
He's
if you
got
just
that
want to sit here
excuse.
and talk about Jennifer Connelly, like we can just do that.
Yeah, the Jennifer
Like
Connelly stream. Yes.
no, just about her. Like I'll just
Hmm.
sit here and talk about her.
Yeah.
That's
Understandably so. Yes. No. I did a stream about Dark City with another channel. They invited me on, and we talked about Dark City, and she was in that too. It's like, oh man, yeah.
So you talked about Jennifer Connelly for an
Yeah,
hour then, as
yeah,
you should have.
exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Jennifer Connelly in a noir film where she's a singer. Like what are you gonna do? Exactly. Anyway, back to the movie. So, um, so Top Gun obviously has some themes that are very different, right? So there's a couple things about this movie I wanted to get into. First, let's just talk about the general quality of it before we get into like the themes and the political implications and all that stuff, because I think there's a bunch of different angles. I'll just come out and say I like the movie. It was very enjoyable. Like I said, it was nice to see a movie that wasn't all CGI. Real planes, real cameras. You can feel it. It feels different. For most of the movie, that it's got more practical effects and things are really happening in a lot of different scenarios. it was refreshing to have a big action movie that felt, kind of
Not
pro.
cynical.
Yeah, it's not cynical, right? It's, um, you and I are both talking about now that we're getting a little older, especially, we feel the old man comes back and does, gets these young guns trained up,
Yeah, that's like a soft spot in my any sort of like old man movie like Logan or The Searchers, or which I guess those are technically both westerns too.
mhm.
Or like Gran Torino, like any sort of angry old man movie. I just like, it's my favorite. Even if it's not good, I like it. Like
Yes.
I've got a soft spot for like old man fights back movies.
Yeah, you felt like the characters, they had a good rapport. It felt like the motivations were real. It didn't feel like a lot of they didn't have to manufacture a lot of the stuff in this one. I guess it felt like kind of an olive branch to an older time where you could have big budget pro American military movies and everyone would kind of be on board in a lot of ways. Like you said, not a lot of cynicism, not a lot of staring at your nose, but I can't believe what the country's become, or I
Well,
can't, how could we be doing this, or I'm emotionally conflicted about all the difficulties are internal to the characters, not external to the country.
which, if you look at when Top Gun was made, it was post Vietnam. And there was a series of movies made post Vietnam that were kind of pro military, because so much had been created and done that was very much anti-war and anti-military, right? As good as things like Apocalypse Now are, or Platoon is. It's a very much very good movies, by the way, but it's very much about the cynicism and the grimness of war, but not very much about uh, a group of individuals coming together to form a team to because not because their primary focus is wanting to go kill people, but their primary focus is that these people care about each other and want to protect one another, and so they become consummate professionals in order to do that, not for hate of the enemy, which in we can talk about the lack of enemy in these movies, which is the same in the first one, but not so much for hate of the enemy, but for love of those who they serve with, which is a great message. I'm sorry, I will not be cynical about that. I really like this movie.
No, like I said, I think it was very good. It's very entertaining. It's not going to change your life. It's a Hollywood blockbuster, but it is a good time. It's a good time. Very
Yep.
entertaining. Like I said, overall pretty positive message. As you pointed out, a lot of people have the couple criticisms with the you didn't really have an enemy. It's just kind of a treaty violation by some unnamed country somewhere. um
But that's the exact same plot of the first movie. Like, the enemy was never really discussed in that. It's always very vague. It's it's the Russo-Chinese Soviet sort of thing,
yeah, it's a
right? And
mig, right? That's
it's
it.
a MiG.
Yeah.
But that never really bothered me, because these movies weren't really ever about the enemy. They were really more about the the pilots. And
Absolutely.
I would argue that, if these type of real world situations were going to go off, these pilots don't really know who the enemy is, right? These are going to be some of the first contacts between our country, enemy contact between our country and their country, and so their information of which they have would be quite vague. So, like, maybe I'm defending it a little too much here, but like, it was, they're trained to do a mission kind of regardless of who the enemy is, and they're going to have a limited amount of information when before they actually fly off and go, if it was like some sort of first contact situation that was about to start off a war. So, like I said, maybe I'm just looking all this through rose-colored glasses, rose-tinted glasses, but that part never bothered me.
Now there are some good parts in there that I think speak to kind of the modern military that I know you liked and that we both liked. And so one was the the fact that he addresses early on that basically while these are the best of the best pilots, these are all supposed to be like Top Gun graduates who are coming back for this one mission. He points out that basically none of them have been in a real dogfight. Like they're all very mechanically good at what they do. Like they're all very good and theoretically, but they've always had massive advantages. They've never fought enemies who could really put them in serious threat.
Correct.
And that's a message that I think iterates not just through the pilots, though obviously it's most pronounced in pilots because that's where the biggest technological advantages are experienced, but the modern military in general, right? The fact that that's one of the things that was always kind of weird about kind of this escalation and people kind of pushing for war with Russia here is like, America's had a number of conflicts here recently, but they've all been with kind of goat herders, right? Like you don't have
we've spent the last 25 years fighting brush fire wars,
exactly,
which is not the same as fighting a what's the word I'm looking for, an industrialized state, right?
Yep.
That has access to tanks and anti-armor weapons and actual training. So like we've been fighting relatively low op tempo conflicts for a very long time. But we have not had a conflict with a serious competitor, with a country that has serious threat to the United States for a very, very long time. And the same goes for these pilots, right? That's what Tom Cruise's character is always trying to, like, he's having all this pushback against the admiral, talking about they've been told they've been the best of the best for years, but all they've done in the last 10 years is do high level bombing missions and strafing runs against insurgents and terrorists. They have not gone toe to toe with an enemy fighter jet in their entire career.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of I guess that's why they tolerate him, is like he is the last fighter pilot that's actually had combat experience.
Right. Yeah.
Except for one guy, the Hangman, one of the characters, Hangman, has claimed one kill against like a MiG-21 in his F-18.
Yeah, that's right.
Like
he was known. Yeah.
It's like saying I destroyed a biplane in my fighter jet. But anyway.
Well, and that's the next interesting theme, right? Is they keep saying the phrase 5th gen fighters the whole time, right? 5th gen fighters. You can't go up against 5th gen fighters, which is kind of an awkward thing. But what they're basically saying, a theme throughout the movie is basically, for once these people are actually going to be in a situation where they don't have the technological superiority and they have to be better humans. It's going to be about the person piloting the machine and less about the machine, to the point where at some point they say that he says, I think it's one of the generals is saying to Tom Cruise's character, you can't do this, we aren't going to need you soon, it'll just be people flying these things from remote computers or something, or it'll just be an AI, and guys like you are a relic, you're a dinosaur. And Tom Cruise is like, maybe one day, but not today, right? They're still
I love that.
Of course, yeah, it's John Henry, right? Like it's John Henry versus a steam engine, right? It's a tale as old time.
Right.
You still need the humans, you still need the guys who can get things done. You can't automate it all away yet. And so that's a big theme of the movie too, is
and I pray they never do.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I really hope that never happens. Like, that's a line from Red October. Sean Connery's character is like, I saw the Red October and I saw it was built for one purpose: a war with no battles, with no heroes, only casualties. And that's where technology takes war in a way. It takes, it's weird to say this, I guess, but we, in our race for technological advantage, we remove the humanity from war, which I think is very dangerous. Because when you take the warrior out of war, and people who make decisions on who lives and who dies are not on the battlefield, or not within, let's say, a relatively close proximity to the people that they're fighting, you can make a lot of decisions that are not the correct choice, or two, choices that you can make that are made by people who are not necessarily warriors or not necessarily soldiers. You know, when you can kill people from thousands and thousands of miles away, you lose the humanity and the sacrifice it requires in order to do so. And it's already obviously happened today with drones and things like this, but they're just, oh God, there's no honor in it, and it's very disappointing. This is just grim, but that's part of the theme of the movie.
It is, and I think that that's a theme that echoes across everything. Like, this is a big thing that I think is really important. People need to understand, like, the battle is against automation. The battle is against systems. The battle is against inhumanity, not just at the military level, but everything. Like, either you can disappear into a digital simulacrum of an experience, or you have to have the real thing, right? Like, and every time you turn over a responsibility, a human responsibility, a human decision to a system, you
To
lose
automation.
you lose
Yes.
humanity on the battlefield, to bureaucrats, to politics, your family, everything. And it's the fight to stay human at this point on a lot of levels.
I
You
agree
remember
with
that
that.
show Sliders? That it's really
Yeah.
terrible. Yeah. So for
Yeah.
those who don't know, there's a really terrible, like, kind of like Quantum Leap style show called Sliders, where basically they it had like Jonathan Rhys Davies and Jerry O'Connell, I think is his name.
Yeah, it wasn't good, but it was good stories.
It
Like, it
had
was really bad production, and the
yes,
acting was not very good, but the stories themselves were quite interesting.
it did. They dropped into these different dimensions, basically, right, every week.
Yeah.
And the one that always stuck with me is there's this one where they drop in, and there's these really powerful mechs, like, blowing up cities and towns, and they're taking out everything, and they can't figure out what's going on. Like, why are these robots? This world is basically just these robots running around and destroying everything. And slowly they come to realize that there was a war that was completely automated, right? Like, these two civilizations completely automated their war, and they fought it all from just like these pods, and mainly it was done by computers, but there were still some human pilots that were running these mechs. And they slowly discover that, like, basically there's one man and one woman left on this entire world, and
They're fighting each other.
all they know how to do is, like, fight each other, and they think it's a game because they've been so many generations removed from the actual war. They think it's just a video game they're playing, and it's the only thing to do where they live. So they're, like, running around blowing up every last bit of their civilization, playing a game they don't understand is actually a war against the only other human that exists. Like, and that's what's keeping them from. And so I don't know, for some reason that's always where my brain goes when we talk about automating
You
war.
think that's kind of like the end point of automation?
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah,
It's just ultimate destruction, not even realizing that it's destruction.
Yeah, completely detached from what keeping civilization from happening because you're so busy playing a game that you don't even realize is the actual destruction of the society. But anyway, but yeah, so that's a very interesting theme of the movie that we both really liked. Are there any other themes that you wanted to touch on before I kind of get to my little riff on kind of the meta stuff of this?
The other big theme was competency versus compliance, which was the big thing there was, like, obviously, so Maverick's character has always been very competent, but then also been very non-compliant. So he keeps, I mean, if he was a real person, he'd probably been court-martialed like 20 times over. But like within the movie, he's a cowboy. He's effective. He does what is necessary. But he's surrounded by people who have never had the experience that he has had. And so all they do is fall back to what they've been told is like the correct way to do things versus what's the actual correct, what actually is effective. And so they keep making fun of him or kind of writing him down. Like, he's constantly reminded he should have been an admiral by now. He's constantly reminded that he's a relic. But when push came to shove, he was the one that they actually needed in order to perform the mission. So it was just basically, okay. I mean, I get it. It's Hollywood, and it's like, it's a love letter to Tom Cruise in a way, because it was his favorite character. But it's basically saying, even after all of this, we're going to guess kind of acknowledge finally that we actually do need you, even though we've been telling you the entire time that you're kind of a failure of a human being. And those were the scenes in the movie that I kind of choked up on a little bit, especially when he goes and sits and talks with Iceman.
I was going to
And
bring that up. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, where it's just like the Navy needs Tom, the Navy needs you, Tom Cruise. The Navy needs you, Maverick. And
Well,
it's just as somebody, oh, hold on, just let me finish
sure.
this one. And it just, as somebody who has spent the majority of his adult life, fighting America's wars or being involved in that world, it was just a little bit of a choke and not really integrating very well back into society, because he didn't, obviously. It's, I couldn't help but see a little bit of me in that, in the sense that, it's not much, but like the people that matter acknowledge that he's necessary and required. And that's something that, rang true with me.
No, I think that that's very true, because I first, I love how they used Val Kilmer in there, even though he couldn't kind of act. Like, that was very
It's still
good.
always, but it made it better almost. Like, it
They
was just like,
exist.
oh
Yeah,
God, they used it perfectly.
they
Like
did.
within, yeah. And then the fact that he's typing on his computer to talk to him. And yet at the end, in order to say, obviously what was the most important thing, he stood up and actually spoke to him, even though it was
Mhm.
very painful for him. It was just like, oh my God, like this is my kind of tearjerker here.
Yeah, and especially looking, I know obviously your personal experience is very much one of people not especially people in brass and stuff, not appreciating and not understanding what's necessary, or finding people who are getting things done easily discarded, even though they're very effective. But we also see this as a larger scale issue, right? With the purges that are happening with the military ideologically. It's very clear that the military itself in the real world is trying to do a lot of what's happening to Tom Cruise, right?
Yes,
They're getting rid of all the rough edges, right? Pushing all the people with the wrong beliefs out. Those are also
correct.
happen to be the most effective people, right? If you
you
look at
you don't you don't become you don't go to war, or you don't end up in combat situations without it turning you into kind of a a maverick in a way, right? It's, if
Mhm.
you have these experience, if you have combat experience, you are no longer going to be a smooth around the edges. It's just fact, right? The people I served with, while some have integrated back into society better than others, everyone I've served with is not what you would call a normal person, right? Every single one of them has quirks and some strange beliefs, and has things that they do that other people would not be considered normal. If you go to war, you do not come back the same person, and 99% of those people are going to be a little strange compared to what you would consider the rest of society is. And so, as you say, right, it's Maverick's character is obviously, within the confines of him, he's a combat veteran, right? He's one of the only pilots who's actually shot down enemy aircraft in the last 30 years. And so he is considered strange and weird. And he is a little weird, right? He lives in a derelict hangar and works on his P-51, which that's just, Tom Cruise has a real P-51 and he's an actual pilot, and he just wanted to put it in the movie, which fair enough.
Yeah, right.
Like, I would also want to put my P-51D in a movie if I had one. But like, right, he's a strange man, he and they attack him on it multiple times. Like, you never had a family, nobody ever loved you. You were never normal, you were never one of us. And those little moments in the movies, in the movie, where the only people who care about him are his contemporaries, right? The people he went to Top Gun school with, Iceman, and then the other admiral, when he's on the aircraft carrier, and
Mhm.
the admiral says to him, it's like, you were born for this. This is where you belong, and this is where we need you. And all I could think of the entire time is, you couldn't have told him that at the beginning of the movie or something, because like when he really needed it, like you had to wait till the final moment. But it's such a moment that's so, I mean, Maverick's holding back tears, obviously, when he talks to Iceman, and when he's on the deck of the aircraft carrier, we're about to go on the mission. He's holding back tears then, because he doesn't care if he comes back alive or dead, right? It's what he was built for. And he sacrifices himself willingly. And it happens to be that the other young man who plays Goose's son flies around and sacrifices himself to rescue him. And then like they get an F-14 and shoot down 5th gen fighters, and it's all, fun and games, right? I think the last 10, 15 minutes of the movie are a bit more fantasy, but great fantasy. I'll take it. But like the whole point is like, he was a warrior who he was never worried about his personal cost. He gave everything, and they hated him for it until he was needed. Mm-hmm. And yet finally, once they shared the bond of combat with him, they accepted him, not because he joined them, but because they joined him.
I will say this: the minute they were doing that briefing, and they're like, "They've even got some F-14s down there,"
you knew it was coming.
I knew. I leaned over me. It's like, so you don't put a shotgun over the mantle unless you plan to use it in the second act, right? Like that's like too obvious. But anyway, yeah, no. It, like I said, was a great movie.
I'm sorry. I really liked it. Now talk about all the cynical parts, but like, I can't be. I love this movie too much.
No, I really enjoy it. So, like I said, this is the best of the bunch of movies I'm about to talk about. Like, I really enjoyed it. It's great. So, go see it, enjoy it. It's well worth it. I'm not downplaying how good the movie is. It's very enjoyable. But I will say this: this is just an overarching theme that I think you can apply to both the movie and kind of our society in general. I'll bounce it off the theory off you and see what you think. So we now kind of have an archetype of these movies, right? It's the old guard handoff of these franchises, right? They all kind of work the same way. The old guys come back. No one believes them, or they forget about what they've done, or many of them have isolated. They don't have families. They never connected. Blah blah blah. We saw this with the Ghostbuster movie. We saw this with Luke Skywalker in the Star Wars movies, right? So like they've kind of been forgotten, or they've been relegated, but they have to come back, right? And so like this Burger King Kids Club of like a new generation assembles, and they get together and they kind of fill the different archetypes, and it's very clear that the idea is like, we're gonna hand this franchise off, right? We're gonna take this franchise from the late 70s, early 80s, and we're going to hand it off to this new generation so we can make like 18 more Ghostbusters movies, or 20 more Star Wars movies, or 10 more Top Gun movies.
You're talking about the soft reboot. I mean, that's
exactly. Yeah. And so this pattern is down, right? Like they all do the same thing. They all have the same premise. They even almost always have the same like montage of cuts from the movie you haven't seen in 30 years, just in case some kid never saw it. And I guess it's supposed to that was the one thing that bugged me in the movie, is like, we don't need the flashback. Like, everyone who saw this movie has seen the first movie, and if they haven't, why are they even here? Like, don't do that. But anyway, like I said, one moment in an otherwise great movie. So I'm not knocking him too much, but I'm just saying we have this moment in every one of these movies, right?
We do.
They did it less than other movies do, so at least there's that. Some of the other movies are they're just egregious in the amount of, it's like I'm watching 20, the last Matrix movie was like 20 minutes of the first Matrix movie,
Oh, that was just it was terrible movie.
Yeah, it was painful. It
was so bad. It was just bad, and it's just poor Keanu Reeves. Like, what a bad movie. I guess they made a lot of money.
Yeah, so we've seen this thing before, right? And so at the end of this movie, and this is true of all of these, right? Whether it's Star Wars or Ghostbusters or Top Gun, right? We're gonna get to the end, and it's that moment where they have to like hand it off to the new people, right? But they never quite do it, right? Like Luke Skywalker has to step in and save the day one last time, or the Ghostbusters have to show up at the very end and all like team up to actually get the job done. Or Tom Cruise has to like, come on, at what, like 60 years old, he's gonna survive G's that these 25-year-olds in top form can't survive. I mean, it's just like, don't get me wrong. Again, great movie, but like if he was really handing it off, he would have been the guy sitting in the seat, right? And it would have been about him having to like get these kids to get the job done, right? But at the end, they still
I'm going
have
to
to hand
defend
it
it
to him.
again.
Yeah,
I'm going to defend it on this particular case because it's about the warrior versus the young untrained, right?
yeah,
And that's the one. While I agree with you on the other movies, in this one it makes sense in the story that it's the last warrior who's kind of having his last hurrah, and of course it's a last hurrah for Tom Cruise as well.
right.
But within the the math of the movie, within the confines of the movie, it makes sense that he's not proving that he's what's the word I'm looking for? It's not that he's it's not that he's better than these young pilots, and it was like I'm not doing it right. Basically, I'm trying to say is like what he was at 25 or 30 was miles ahead of where these kids were, where they are as pilots now, because they never had the same challenges as his generation of pilots.
Right.
So he's the best, but he was better in the past, I guess is trying to my argument. And he's still got it. And again, any sort of old man kicking ass like movie, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief. But you're right. But I don't care. I loved it.
Well, I guess here, let me link it to my broader social point, which is this. It kind of feeds into your last point there, is the boomer generation has had a really hard time handing things off, right? Like they haven't really uh they have that mentality, right? Like the new generation didn't have the challenges we do, and so we're the ones who have to get everything done. And so whether it be political power or financial stability, there in a lot of ways the boomer generation has said, no, we're holding on to power, or we're staying in the spotlight, or we're going to be the ones accumulating, like basically like into the
accumulating
grave, right?
wealth.
Right, into the grave, right? And they've just never been able to hand it off to the next generation. They've never been able to say, all right, our time has come and gone. Now it's our, we have to give this to you. And like in many ways, yeah, like some of the generation hasn't been tested, but in many ways it's because they weren't allowed to be, right? The generation before them was never allowing them to step up into those
you
positions.
never trust us to take over in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a reason that we have that no one under the age of 70 is like allowed to compete for the presidency at this point, right? Like everyone's got to be pushing 80 years old, and it's going to be.
It is kind of old man Olympics, isn't it?
Like because you just can't hand this political power off to like younger people anymore, and so. I'm just saying there's something there. Like, obviously, like I said, I think that you're right that Top Gun is the best of this genre of movie. If I was going to tell anyone to watch any one of these, it would be this one. This is probably the only one I like completely enjoyed. Like, and again, a lot of this is due to its lack of cynicism, right? In many of these others movies, it's entirely based on cynicism, right? The Ghostbusters and the Star Wars, very cynical movies in a lot of ways. This one, not so much. And so I think that, and like I said, this olive branch kind of red America in a lot of ways. Like we can still make a movie that doesn't have to just crap on the country.
And surprise, surprise, it makes millions and millions of dollars. So,
yeah.
Who would have thought?
Well, and you saw a lot of these outlets, there's actually these preemptive outlets giving you both sides of this take. Like, well, no, the reason that this movie did well isn't because it's anti-woke or blah, blah, blah. Or no, even if a movie like this does well, it doesn't mean Hollywood should start making more anti-woke, pro-American, movies. So that aspect and that narrative was not lost on the wider media as well. So like I said, I think this is a good movie. I'm not deriding it. I'm just saying I noticed a pattern that even in this movie, which was good, there was this reluctance to completely turn the keys over, right? And I don't know if they're ever going to try to make a Top Gun with now like Rooster or whatever, and that
It'll be
saga,
terrible.
Hangman. But that's the thing, right? Is in all of these movies, everyone just wants to watch the old characters. They don't care about the new characters. And they're so bad at focusing and handing off these things because it's like there should just be new movies at this point, right? Even though again, I love this movie. There should be new movies. There should be new stories to tell. But we're just
our
stuck
generation
in...
never had our own myths, right?
Exactly.
We just piggybacked off the myths of our fathers.
Yes, and you should always build on them. There should be continuity, right? But we
should have our own stories as well.
Yeah,
But our generation never went anywhere or did anything interesting, and it's boring. We just survived multiple economic downturns and like the decline of the empire. Who wants to talk about that stuff? That's boring.
Which is why I think a lot of these movies lapse into the cynicism, right? Because where else can you go? And that's one thing. That's again one of the reasons why this is the good one, because it kind of avoids that, manages to avoid that, even though it's so kind of
modern movies can't give us hope for the future,
right?
That things can change. God forbid,
right?
Like that's against the agenda.
Well, because to talk about how they would change would be to embrace a different narrative, right? You can't.
Of course,
there's no hope in the progressive narrative. There's no hope.
Things are going exactly as they should be. Why would you want them to change?
Exactly. Yeah,
things are great and always will be great, and things are only ever getting better all the time. Obviously,
right. The revolution happened. We're at the end of history. We should be there. And if you don't like what's going on around you, that's just because you're just insufficiently loyal to the new religion, right?
If you really believed hard enough, then you would realize everything around you is the best thing it's ever been, ever.
Right. And so in many ways, the most rebellious thing you can do is make a movie like this, right? Which does give you a different competing vision, at least on some level, right? Of kind of what the future can be. I wouldn't say that, there's no, obviously like that's not the point of the movie. That's not the point of Top Gun Maverick, but at least the voice is different enough that people noticed. And I think that makes a big difference. But that said, anything else about the movie you want to hit before we start working our way through super chats? We built up quite a bit here.
Go see it. I liked it.
Yeah,
it's worth a watch.
It is. Like I said, it's not life-changing, but it's just a good popcorn movie. It's something you haven't had. I enjoyed the Dune movie. That's probably the other one that
Dune was really good. I like Dune as well.
Yeah, but
that's completely alien, right?
Yeah,
that's like a completely, which is great, by the way. It's Dave Villeneuve does a great job creating a world that never existed.
Yes.
But that's like a completely alien culture, and it's fascinating, but a very different kind of movie, obviously.
Absolutely. All right, so let's start working our way through here. Let's see. Darth Kilhoun for $5. Thank you very much. Having served in the army, I can't stand fighting a war for democratic idealism when no one cares about it in the armed forces. We want something to believe in.
I 100% agree with you. Man does not subsist on bread alone. And you cannot have a functional military that's only calling is financial security and compliance with the state. There has to be something more. There's
a line in Oswald Spengler, or not Oswald Spengler, is Carl Schmidt. He says something to the effect of, men will gladly die for an in-group. They'll die for a nation. They'll die for a religion. But if you ask them to die for an economic zone, that's monstrous, right? And I think about that a lot when.
One that always comes back to me is Chesterton, of course. Mm-hmm. The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him. And the thing is we live in a society where we have, or they're doing their very best to make sure that there's nothing behind us.
Yep.
Right. If I have no family, if if you make it so difficult that I cannot raise children and have my home, what am I fighting for? If you're destroying the family unit, I've got no reason to fight for you.
Absolutely. All right. So Life of Brian, $4.99. They'll medicate us into Eloy, and we will bend down and enjoy it. Isn't that the race from the time machine? Is that the? I think that's the. But yeah, I get what you're.
Yes.
Yeah. Where they're eating
Yes.
them. But yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's right. But yes, no, thank you, Brian, for your donation. Yeah, I mean that's certainly the goal in a lot of ways. It seems right. Just enough distractions and enough, but that's the problem, right? Is the system doesn't feel like it can actually sustain that. Like I don't think they can do that. That's the problem. Is like they don't seem to they seem to be moving forward as if they can kind of medicate and distract everyone enough to pull that stuff off. But it seems like supply chain issues, standard living, all that stuff is kind of falling apart. And I don't think they can create that technological, even, not dystopia in that sense that kind of distracts everyone.
Good in a way, but also
Right.
terrible that people have to live through it.
Yes, that's very much a lot. Unfortunately, often a theme that we talk about is good. The good news is they can't create the kind of evil stasis they want. The bad news is that means
they can't do it, and it's painful. Yeah.
Well, it's I was talking to Mark Hemingway, right, and it's like is like, it's we just wish that people were competent but evil. It's like the Joker speech, right?
Yes,
like everyone's fine as long as there's a plan, right? It doesn't matter how horrible the plan is, as long as there's a plan. It's what's terrifying is the lack of plan.
And I've said this on this channel before. Like I would care less about political ideology as long as it was effective.
Yeah.
Right. I don't. If the progressive ideology made things better, I would. It would lend weight to the argument that it's the correct philosophy.
But of course
it doesn't.
Right. And there's no way they can hide that fact at the end of the day. All right. So Bolero 393 for $5. Thank you very much. Has anyone else heard about Patton's movingly said, we need to defeat Germany so our grandchildren can watch kinky pride parades? Yeah. Yeah, there's that Twitter account where like, what are they dying for? And it's the guys getting ready to jump off the beach in Normandy and from the landing craft, and it's just whatever degeneracy is on the internet that day in the thought bubble. Yeah,
I apologize for what we've created with a society of which they've given us, although it was going out downhill by World War II anyway. But that's a whole other topic of conversation.
Yeah, whole another thing to get into. All right,
whole other kettle of fish.
Yeah. All right, Skeptical Panda for $5. Thank you very much. Hi, Auron and Ostrakon. I don't have anything to say on the discussion. Just wanted to help support your based tweets, Auron. Keep up the good work. Yeah, man, I really appreciate it. Always really, really appreciate your support. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Pete Budapest for $9.99. Thank you. 80s and 90s American nostalgia films are becoming ubiquitous, and while they make me feel good and they also end up pissing me off as I reflect on 30 years of opportunity squandered and civilizational decay. Yeah, that's a big thing, right? It's like, yes, at some point it's comfort food, right? That you're getting to relive those experiences.
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
But at the same time, you're like, man, we're almost right back to where we started, and in some way in a degraded way. Like not only did we not go anywhere, we can't even quite get back to where we were 30 years ago.
Right.
So that is a difficulty in and of itself, right?
Well, at least our store shelves are empty, and I don't know, but like that's like so Soviet to me. Like that's very 80s 90s nostalgia right there.
And
like the Russians are fighting and the Russians are having border conflicts. This is like, oh man, like the Cold War, you're back, and along with your friends, crippling debt and supply chain problems. Hi, Cold War.
Sure did miss you. All right, so our next one
we
here.
didn't. I wish you'd go away.
Yeah, if you could just not ever show up again. Hunter counts for $5. Thank you very much. Highway to the Danger Zone. Yep, absolutely. I thought about trying to play the song, but I feel like I would have got flagged. Stupid YouTube would have flagged us with that one. But yeah, I wanted to set that up as the intro music when we came in here. Let's see. RCW for £5. The American public are not ready to lose a real war against China. I mean, yeah, obviously, I don't think China wants to fight a real war, right? Like, I don't think that's really in their interest at the end of the day. Why would they?
It's
right?
Regional influence. They don't need to fight a whole war. They just need to increase their sphere of influence. We've talked about this before. I agree. There's never going to be the out and out war between, Russia and the United States, or United States and China. It's the waxing and waning of the spheres of influence that is going to be the conflict. I mean, it's happening right now, but and obviously, China has, had Taiwan, fixated as something that they want to take back since pretty much the creation of communist China. So that's where they're spending their resources in an attempt to influence that region and ultimately, take over Taiwan. So, but we're at the point nowadays. I honestly don't believe anymore that we would really defend Taiwan if the Chinese took over.
No, definitely not. No,
I think we would pull back. No,
yeah, absolutely. No,
I really don't believe. I really don't believe that we would actually defend Taiwan. I think if anything, not anymore.
I honestly don't. Like I said, I think China's at the winning end of a parasitic relationship, and I don't really see why they would. Like you said, they can shave off the things they want while still getting to grow kind of fat on America. I don't see why they would do that. And don't forget that while China is winning in certain areas, China's got problems of its own. It's got its own.
China's got lots of internal problems.
Yeah, like don't fool yourself into thinking that China is necessarily in this great position. Just because America is losing doesn't mean that everyone else is winning. That's right. Not how it works.
No, the one child policy was really, really bad for China, and it's economic growth and development.
Every Western country is facing this problem. Every industrialized country, and China is now also facing this problem, even without the one-child policy. But the one-child policy also, obviously accelerated this problem for them. In general, our economic system is just based on something that's unsustainable, and the effects of kind of depopulation only exacerbate that problem. So,
when you create an economy where everything is supposed to be, last minute delivery to include our paycheck, by the way, there's no room for error.
Yes.
And so therefore, and you've raised prices to such a level that it's just at the edge of what people can be sustainable at, gives them no opportunity to generate wealth for their next generation. And so people are choosing not to have as many kids, or not having kids, or putting it off till later in life because they can't afford it. And so surprise, surprise, you're killing the golden goose by reducing your economic engine by fine-tuning it so much where people can't have kids.
By maximizing it in the short term, they can't shear the sheep any closer, and now they're
and you've sheared the sheep very, very close at this point. To the point where it's like people can't afford to raise the next generation. So good job, way to balance your. I mean, it's always happened, but way to balance your your company's sheets, off of our labor and back. Oh my God, I'm turning into a socialist.
Look at you!
Oh no!
Get you a hammer. Just slowly drop a hammer and sickle over your.
No! Listen to the words coming out of my mouth. Jesus Christ!
All right, so DOH 917 for $5. The paradox between enjoying the patriotism of propaganda from HW to appease the martial masculine while subtly using funding to cover the future woke projects. Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing, right? I know a lot of people are just like, well, don't ever give any company your money ever. And I get that. I do. I understand that argument of like, you can't give these companies your money because at the end of the day, they're just going to use it to like fund something else that's terrible and they hate you. And yeah, fair enough, I guess. It just at some point you got to let people enjoy, some part of life, right? Like there will be cultural rallying points, there will be things that people rally around even in ways that the companies that produce them don't intend them to be, right? And you can try to shut yourself completely out of culture, but I mean, my buddy academic agent did this, right? He tried to boycott, I think it was like the parent company of Gillette, because he disagreed with one of their advertising companies. And like he did enough research to discover that basically it was impossible because like every company was so interconnected in every industry that attempting to boycott like Procter and Gamble, which was like the parent company of Gillette, basically was impossible. Like you just couldn't, you would have had to like grow all your own food and weave all your own clothes, right? So I guess, everyone needs to draw a line. I understand not directly handing money to people who hate you, but I think everyone has to kind of draw a personal line to where that starts and stops, because the truth is you're not going to just starve these people out on your own through like boycotts and stuff, and people have tried for many years and it hasn't worked. So in one sense I understand not directly handing money to people who hate you, but also like there has to be some level of you have to live in the real world, right? And like people see movies and they buy clothes and they buy food from people who hate them. That's just the truth, unfortunately.
No, it is like it's the real politic of life.
Yeah.
Right. We all eat food. We all have to buy clothes. We aren't going to all go back to cottage industry and make all of our own stuff. Like, that is just not realistic. And we've specialized so much in our economic value, where each person does one very specific thing within the machine of the economy, that it's just, I don't see that ever happening. And I mean, you can acknowledge it, and it's good to acknowledge, but at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do. Yes, you're right. However, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, and obviously, like this is not an absolute necessity in the way that food is. I'm just saying, when art gets made, sometimes it says things that people don't intend it to, and I'm not saying that's
Correct.
exactly the case with Top Gun, but there are many movies that unintentionally kind of woke a lot of people up by saying things that the people who wrote them didn't initially see in them. So just keep that in mind, that there are opportunities even in things that weren't meant to say the things they end up saying.
Can I make one small point that's related to this? That's really the thing that I find very concerning about streaming services.
Yeah.
Is that when movies say things that were not intended, and then you have streaming services that where's primary source of which people watch their films, and then they can be re-edited on the fly.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really like to the point where like I make sure like to have DVDs of movies I really like before they change them.
Yeah, no, this is something very pernicious about the digital landscape, right? Is that works of art can be edited to be censored, even the ones that were originally thought of as like safe in the progressive mind. Once something's discovered about them that could be controversial, they can go back and they can shift them. And so yeah, I'm with you. That one is particularly Orwellian to me. That even when something kind of a reactionary idea is portrayed in something, that they can go back and edit it out and remove it. Yeah.
Which they have done.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So Sean Weiland for $2 sounds like an overlap with William S. Lindsay's Fourth Generation Warfare. Yeah, I don't know a ton about that. I know a lot of people are very influenced by that and talk a lot about it. I've certainly heard it. I need to learn more about that. It's just not my area of expertise, but I know there are plenty of people who can speak at length about Fourth Generation Warfare. Are you familiar with this idea at all, Ostrakon?
You know me, I'm doing my best to be checked out from modern society.
Fair
The last
enough.
book I've been reading is a book of poetry by A.E. Housman. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, fair enough. No,
I was like, you guys have fun. I'm building my house in the woods.
like I said, I've heard it referenced often. I'm slightly familiar with the ideas, but if I go on a length about it, I'll just embarrass myself. So I'll just say that yes, from what I understand, there is some overlap there, but I need to know more. Let's see. Maverick is like The Wire, where McNulty gets his parade. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying. It's been a long time since I watched The Wire, and I remember liking most of it, but not something that stuck with me as much as it did other people. People worship that show, and I enjoyed it when I watched it, but yeah, I get if I remember correctly, that's like the main character who he's always like trying to do the right thing, and that gets him in a ton of trouble because he's everyone else kind of wants to look the other way. And I don't exactly remember how it ends. I'm guessing he doesn't get his parade in the way, yeah. But at the end of Maverick, he does. Something tragic happens, I guess, at the end of The Wire. It's been a long time, so I just don't remember it. Sorry, but yeah, that sounds right. All right, guys. I think made my way through all of our super chats here, so we're gonna start wrapping it up. If you have anything you want to get in before The Wire, you can do that. I'm just gonna thank a few people. Subscribers. Want to thank Easter Worshipper, Nurkish, Santa9901, AWXYZ, and user E042530 I want to thank all of you guys who support me there on Subscribestar. I'm doing the exclusive video once a month there, so if you want to catch one of those, or if you want to be thanked on the live streams, going to be doing a once a quarter call for people who are kind of at the highest level, the founder level. So that'll be happening here soon. If you want to get in on any of that, you can follow the links below. Also, of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel, if you're first time around, this is a great time to do that. So make sure you do.
Is that more like that quarterly? What's that going to be like? Is it more like a Q&A?
Yeah, it's kind of exclusive just for people like that. I'll sit down and kind of have a chat with Q&A people who want to do that.
Bit more back and forth conversation.
Exactly. It's not just the live stream where you've just got one comment. It'll be more of not exactly a one-on-one, but just a small group discussion. So people can kind of have more of a back and forth. Exactly. So
a round table discussion, as it were. Circular table.
It's a table of some kind of geometric.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming by. Really enjoyed it. And as always, thank you, Ostrakon. Always a pleasure.
Always happy to be here.
And thank you guys for stopping by. And as always, I'll talk to you next time.